one of the things I like to say, or I think, is that the pelvis is a gyroscope. So if you watch her hoard balls and do whatever she's doing, and her rate of balance, her functional vision right there, how she moves around the pelvis. I mean, obviously the feet, everything else is moving, but do you see how the way that she just swayed back a little bit there, how that pelvis has a force in it that takes that movement and moves her around. Now I believe that the ankles have subgyros, so do the wrists, and the base of the skull. So all of those factors, see how she just moved her skull back, and all of this, things that she's doing, that functional vision, all propels these forces to stay attracted to one another. So when someone has what I call, what they are after is core strength, which is almost a fallacy, because if she had tight abs at this moment, these functions would be very limited. And that's why with cerebral palsy, stroke, and so forth, balance is the first thing to really get affected and not integrated into the system. So see how she counterbalances the pelvis over the feet with things like this, how her toes are always engaged, her whole foot functions. And this is why too, when people want to correct feet, you know, when they're going to standing with me, and parents automatically want to like correct the toes, and I'm like, that's actually not how real foot function works. As you can see, she'll curl her toes like now and come up. Her feet are out, they go in, she moves around one another, but she knows her proportions around her system. But what I'm covering today is really this internal acceleration, but almost like a centrifugal force provided by the gyroscope. Now I actually can move a person's head where you're going to be able to feel that force of the gyroscope. I don't know if I'm going to cover that in class today. But I've actually proven it to people that you can move a head and you feel that gyroscopic function in the head. You can feel it in the babies, but a human being gets too big for me to show that kind of system function. But see how she just spins around, and she can move her legs independently and all of that, even just for something like that. So anytime her head moves, then you've got that counter balance or counter rotation that's going off of the gyroscopic function going on. And the gyroscope goes back to just simple atomic function. So if we're made up of a billion atoms, that force has to be at a greater rate, unless again the systems aren't working properly from the beginning. And see how she just spins around and does all of that. This is what's cool about having a little munchkin around. So when I'm walking, right, if I'm walking at a certain rate, so I'm now creating a momentum for all of my atoms or my system to work at a certain rate. So if I walk really fast, then I have momentum. I'm working again, my atoms have now increased. Now yes, you can see if I walk really fast, I start to sweat, so that caloric function will come into play. But I believe the movement comes first, and then it starts increasing the heat and the movement functions. But if I have this ball and integrated, the same thing. Now I'm using my atoms or my body, my gyroscopic functions in a certain way. However, if I, let's say, contract my toes, I automatically start to lose that centrifugal force, or again that gyroscopic function. Now if I worked really hard, I'm sure even with these internal contractions I can learn how to work around it. But this is what I talk about all the time, that if you're going to introduce things like an artificial hip to an AFO, then you've got to teach the system how to work around those changes to the body versus expecting the body to act the same. It's just, it creates a different system. So same thing too, if I create, you know, tightness in my abdomen, again for me, since I've now lost my pelvic rotation because my abs now are too tight, it creates a different movement function. And I'm not saying that this isn't interesting to look at, but it's completely different if I let all of those things go. You know, I can change my rate of acceleration. So when I'm working with the pelvis and I see that it has a staccato or the movement functions aren't there to the same rate, there's no way I'm going to get hand functions, those fine motor skills to write. So when people go, you need to work on writing, and I'm like, no, I got to work on the butt. And they go, what does it have to do with it? But if my tush can't write a circle, this isn't happening either. So if I contract all through here, I'll get the function, but not with that same ease, and I have to now think about it versus ooh and swirl and you know. So that's why when you see people that are really mastered their skill, they have a grace because they've just played with it versus it being a laboric function. That's the only reason why I look different doing this work than most people, because I've played with it so much, I just go with it versus thinking about, okay, now I have a foot here, and now don't get me wrong, if a system presents with something what I call a glitch or whatever, that's when I go, oh, this is neat. And I'll go in there versus, oh my God, what did that person do? Now I got to deal with this. It's a complete different mindset. So if I work with a different kind of a ball or a system, again, for it to assume, or like I call the transfer of weight, see my balance and counterbalance, I'm not doing a lift. Yes, I get it that I'm lifting the object, but this is what babies do. They take it in and they move around. The bottle goes here and they learn this and it goes here versus, you know, an adult that just goes, okay, I need to sit down, place my feet here. Okay, now I'm like this. And you've taken away so much movement, whereas again, you see just a child go, oh, can I do this? Can I? Yes, it's a ball and it's orange and it's one and all of this are cognitive things that we bring into it, but a child really knows a ball when they've played with the ball. But again, if I have contracted feet now, Jamie, now I have to, the rate of counterbalance that I need to go over my feet, keep standing and moving this ball, or gosh, I even lose my breath. But if I sit there now and tighten my abs, and now I've lost my quote, this is when you lose the core, not strengthen the core. Do you see how I can't even get this darn thing over my head? So now I'm gonna fall. So why would I risk my system's life? So that's where you get, and it's the system starts limiting itself, not because it's cognitively impaired, on the opposite. It's actually so smart because the system's going, if I do this, I'm just going to go, whoa! So I don't want to do that anymore. Now me as an adult, if I say you can't do this, most adults go, yeah, I can. I'll figure out a way to do with it. That's not how a child works. A child will never threaten its life. So to say, oh, they just can't stand up. No. They can't stand up, therefore they're protecting themselves and won't stand up. Not that they can't stand up and learn it. So I've got to find all of these little movement points in a system, and that's where I'm going to go into my fun little gyroscope.